The door closes, the room tightens, and you're about to hear the part of the story Italy never wanted to explain. Listen closely, because once we start pulling on this thread, it won't stop unraveling. Why did Mussolini, already balancing a fragile regime, drag Italy into a war it wasn't prepared to fight? Why did he launch invasions based on fantasies instead of intelligence? Why did some of his own generals whisper behind closed doors that the Duce was about to walk the nation straight into a disaster so deep it would stain Italy's military legacy forever? You'll feel the pressure as we step inside this. You'll hear the silence between the orders, the hesitation in the corridors of Rome, the fear in the voices of men who saw the cliff edge but couldn't pull Mussolini back from it. And here's the question that still burns. Was Italy's greatest military humiliation, the campaign that broke its confidence and cracked the myth of fascist strength, truly inevitable? Or was it the result of one man's arrogance tightening like a noose around his own army? Let's open the file. This story begins the moment Mussolini convinced himself that Italy could move like a shadow and strike like a giant. He believed history waited for him, that the map of Europe was clay beneath his fingertips, that a single bold move would force the world to kneel before the new Roman Empire. But inside the Palazzo Venezia, the atmosphere was brittle. The generals didn't share the Duce's confidence. They exchanged glances during meetings, the kind that speak louder than objections they were too afraid to voice. They knew the truth. The army was unprepared, under-equipped, and exhausted from earlier campaigns. Italy needed years. Mussolini gave them weeks. The man who demanded absolute loyalty refused to listen to the very warnings that could have saved him. And that silence would come back like a hammer. The invasion of Greece wasn't a strategy. It was a gamble Mussolini couldn't afford to lose. It happened quickly, almost recklessly. Mussolini, desperate to outshine Hitler's sudden triumphs, made a decision that looked bold on paper and suicidal in reality. He didn't wait for complete intelligence reports. He didn't coordinate fully with his commanders. Instead, he acted from a wound: jealousy. Behind closed doors, staff officers could only watch as he boasted that Greece would fall before the snows. But once the orders were issued, any chance of common sense returning was gone. What followed wasn't a campaign. It was a slow-motion collapse. Italian troops marched into the mountains expecting a swift victory. Instead, they found terrain that swallowed entire units, weather that choked movement, and resistance far fiercer than anything Mussolini's planners dared predict. Then came the moment the facade cracked. A single conversation in a frigid forward command post revealed just how fractured the Italian effort truly was. When a brigade commander received conflicting orders, advance or hold, push or retreat, he finally snapped and demanded clarity from headquarters. The reply he received came hours later, delivered by a liaison officer who looked like he hadn't slept in days. The message was vague, almost panicked. The commander reportedly stared at it and muttered, "They don't know what they want, and we're the ones dying for it." That wasn't an isolated moment. It was a symptom. As Greek forces counterattacked with precision and fury, Italian units fell into chaos. Radios cut out, supply lines broke down, ammunition dwindled. And still, Mussolini insisted that the situation was under control. Inside Rome, the reports were red with warnings. But Mussolini buried them under speeches, trying to hold the image of invincibility together, even as the truth seeped through every crack. The humiliation reached its peak the day Mussolini realized he needed Hitler to save him. This is the part the regime tried to keep quiet. This is the moment where arrogance dissolved into fear. When the Greek counter-offensive pushed Italian forces back so far they were practically fighting inside Albania, Mussolini was forced to face the reality he had denied. His easy victory had become a national embarrassment. The reborn empire was begging for rescue. Imagine the discomfort inside that room in Salzburg, where Mussolini sat across from Hitler. Witnesses later described Mussolini as pale, stiff, trying to mask his desperation behind empty bravado. Hitler reportedly listened in cold silence, fully aware that Italy's failure had dragged the Axis into a crisis none of them needed. That meeting wasn't an alliance discussion. It was a confession, and Mussolini hated himself for it. Every failure in Greece tied back to one truth Mussolini never escaped. He mistook pride for power, and people paid the price. As the German Wehrmacht swept into Greece to bail Italy out, Italian soldiers watched another nation fight the battle they were supposed to win. Some wrote in diaries that they felt erased. Others simply stopped writing. Italy's humiliation wasn't the defeat itself, it was the exposure. The myth collapsed. The world saw the cracks, and Mussolini's grip, so tight, so absolute, began to loosen under the weight of his own misjudgment. That arrogance didn't just cost Italy a campaign. It cost Mussolini his credibility, his authority, and eventually his regime. If you've followed this far, you already know the kind of history we deal with here. Raw, hidden, and sharper than it looks. So stay close. Subscribe so you don't miss the next file we open. Drop a comment so I know which sealed door you want unlocked next. Share this with someone who thinks they already know the story. Because what we reveal here always runs deeper than the surface. There's more in the archive, and it's waiting.